Welcome back, dear friend. In the previous trainings we talked about the reasons behind overpollution and overconsumption of natural resources in the forest. And one of the reasons is that people prioritize consumptive and extractive uses of the forest ecosystem and undervalue the non-use benefits and indirect benefits of this ecosystem. We also talked about how we can integrate non-use values of the forest ecosystem into development and managing planning. We used the values framework for this approach. Unfortunately, while implementing the values framework, we may end up not with one but several feasible and attractive options. All of them may promise great benefits to both stakeholders and our forest ecosystem. What option should we choose then? How can we decide on the best option possible? Unfortunately, pursuing multiple options is not really feasible and may even not be entirely realistic, because we usually have limited human, financial, technical resources and time, also a resource. So in choosing the right option, we need to see what are the criteria of our decision making. This can be the criteria related to economic feasibility and economic benefits, social ethics, who wins and who loses in each scenario, and in general whether there are sufficient resources to cover all the needs of the project. Because one project can be relatively cheap and easy to implement, but it will offer very few benefits. While the other projects may require the entire variety and the entire amount of resources that we have, but at the same time offer much greater benefits and much greater value to the forest and our stakeholders. So also, we need to consider one more criteria that is kind of tricky to account for. We're talking about opportunity cost. Opportunity costs are a special category of economic costs that mean that these are the benefits, the potential benefits and gains foregone due to the choice of one particular alternative among the multitude of different options. For example, this can be all the benefits that we, people that use this forest, lose if one particular choice, one particular decision regarding this forest is implemented and we lose all the benefits entailed to other possible options of using this forest. A very clear case is that if the state chooses to cut down all these trees and clear all the forests in order to gain some economic profits, or this is like lobbying from some logging company, then we as its visitors will lose all the benefits of enjoying this beautiful autumn forest, this ecosystem, of breathing its fresh air, of recreation among the woods, and many other ecosystem services. Another example that we can use to illustrate the opportunity costs is a very common management dilemma for forest ecosystem. One option can be of using this relatively unmanaged forest is to designate it as a ecotourism reserve, a national park, build some eco trails here, some places for recreation, and then allow tourists to come and enjoy its ecosystem services. The opportunity costs here are that we will have not so rich biodiversity and less qualitative ecosystem services that we would have had if this would be, let's say, protected area. So in the case of the second option, the protected area reserve, we will have the opportunity costs of all the profits that we could have gained from tourists if we would have this as an ecotourism, a national park area. And of course there is the third alternative. If, like I said earlier, the state decides to cut down this forest and use it for profits, for export of timber, and then we will not have options and we will not have benefits from the two alternative scenarios that I had presented earlier. The issue with the opportunity costs is that it can relate not only to alternatives on one particular site, on one forest, but to different areas and scenarios in different places at once. For example, if we choose to protect this forest, we may not offer sufficient protection to other forests in the country. What it means to our forest management planning is that we should consider the options that can be realized within the limits of our financial, human, technical capacities. We also need to consider the option that minimizes our costs while maximizing the expected benefits of our choice. And these benefits should not only exceed budget costs, but also the opportunity costs of not pursuing all other alternatives that we have. Only in this case we can be sure that we have chosen the forest management proposal that is economically feasible, attractive, and is the optimal solution for our targeted forest. To aid us in such complex decision making, there are numerous approaches to compare alternative projects options between each other. One of the most well-known and hence commonly used approach is called cost-benefit analysis, or CBA for short. Cost-benefit analysis is an economic approach to estimate the benefits, the expected benefits of a project, and compare it to its cost. It can be applied to an individual project where we compare these expected benefits and the costs and see whether the project is worth pursuing. Or it can be applied to a variety of alternatives that we need to choose, so that we can see the ratio of expected benefits and costs and of each option, and then decide which of these alternatives are worth going forward with. How can this help us in our forest management planning and decision making? Well, firstly, we can see what options in our list have benefits exceeding costs, and we could immediately take them towards the next step, while those where the benefit to cost ratio is less than 1, we can immediately exclude as unfavorable ones. Then at the next step we will work with the solutions where ratio of benefits to costs is greater than 1, and can proceed to choosing the best ones among all the options, and pursue the ones where the expected benefits are the greatest. In CBA, benefits and costs are expressed in a single metric, monetary units. Therefore, economic evaluation of ecosystem services is very crucial at this stage, so that we can capture the economic value translated into the language of money into our cost-benefit analysis and compare it to the costs of implementing one project or the other. Ecosystem services provide benefits and value not only at the present moment, but also far into the future. So in our cost-benefit analysis, we need to consider all the future flows of our benefits. At the same time, costs may occur at the present moment as the implementation costs and maintenance management costs that extend into the future. However, psychologically, we prioritize current benefits and costs over to the ones occurring in the future. So, in our cost-benefit analysis, we need to gradually reduce the economic value of benefits and costs also to the present moment. In scientific language, it means that we discount future flows of benefits and costs to their present value. What we get as an output of our CBA exercise is the comparison between the discounted flow of all the expected benefits that we would receive if we implement each of our proposals and the costs that we would incur from the implementation again of each of our alternatives. In the end, we want to see that the higher the net present value of a particular project is, then the more promising and the more desirable is this particular choice that we could take on and pursue. Certainly, CBA has its drawbacks and disadvantages. For example, how can we integrate the non-monetary significance of the forest and the intrinsic value of the forest ecosystem to people and indigenous communities? And how can we also add and consider in CBA the ethical and moral considerations that would make our decision in the end not only cost efficient, but also ethical and morally correct to people. For such cases, there are other analytical and decision-making approaches. For example, we can use the multi-stakeholder approach, where we invite representatives of our key stakeholders for together deciding on the options, on weighing the pros and cons of each option, and finally making the appropriate decision making. Certainly there are a lot of ways and a lot of knowledge about this multi-stakeholder approach, this cost-benefit analysis and other methods. You can look at them on the web page of our course. However, by now we touched upon the subject of stakeholders, and you may be wondering, who are these stakeholders? Who should we consider in our decision-making and forest management action plan? And finally, who should we communicate the results of our economic evaluation and cost-benefit analysis? These are very good questions, and we will certainly explore them in the next training and the third chapter of the course. See you there!